Welcome to part 2 of our interview with Jonathan Kruk. This is Homerik. Today we're going to find out a little bit more about Jonathan Kruk and his artistic process.
The dominant spirit, however, was an apparition of a galloping Hessian trooper without a head.
What does that look like? And what do we see with the upcoming album in sequence from The Circle of Dead Children? Find out more in this interview. We're here with Jonathan Kruk today. This is part 2 of our discussion on behind the scenes. Who is the storyteller of The Circle of Dead Children, the upcoming Homerik album? And I am really curious here, Jonathan. We've had a discussion a little bit about your past, and what I'd like to talk about is your involvement on a creative level here with Homerik, as well as maybe some outside creative endeavors that you perhaps have. So let's actually start there. Do you, I know you're a storyteller at the old Dutch church in Sleepy Hollow who tells the story of Ichabod Crane and the Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow legend, and we also know of the Christmas Carol and various stories that you've told. So I'm curious as to, outside of that, are there any other creative endeavors other than Homerik that you are working on currently?
Yes, thank you for asking. I've been working for quite a while on a book entitled Supernatural on the Hudson, an anthology of stories, ghostly and beyond, highlighting strange phenomenon along the Hudson River. And everything from, the origin story of the Headless Horseman, but also, again, some of the other mysteries that occur there. A ghostly fellow in a rowboat, an arrival of mischief-making spirits who sometimes create mayhem, if you will, on board boats, turning them around in circles, or even, as they did long ago when sloops predominated, sinking them. So I'm working on that, but that's probably going to be a book for older kids. I'm also at this time, developing a series of little short storytelling films, working with, to take some of the tales I've long told and make a kind of like an outdoor version of them, little fairy tales outdoors. And I want to pursue that all the more. Some of them have turned out really in a way that enchants me, which is not always the case. Usually I cringe seeing myself or hearing myself or recording.
I think we both share that in common sometimes, by the way.
I think many people do. Yeah, you just don't want to see yourself there. It's kind of mortifying. And I'm also trying, looking into doing things like voiceover for perhaps 19th century classics, or even for my own 2 books, Legends and Lore of Sleepy Hollow and the Hudson Valley, and Legends and Lore of I have them over here, Sleepy of the Hudson Highlands. There's a lot of illustrations in these, but and they're with the History Press. But there's also some little dream projects where I'd love to create a little, like a radio program of Hudson River lore and history, where there's a little story that engages you and intrigues you. Then there's like a little break, maybe a word from our sponsor, and then I come back with the rest of the story, like the old radio personality Paul Harvey, who would tell you a story about a train that was about to run off the track, and then you were thinking, oh, there's going to be a crash, and now we're going to have a word for what happened to that train by going to a commercial from the hardware store, and then he would pause and come back. And now, for the rest of the story, turns
Wow.
out a baboon was turning the brake on the train to prevent it from running off the track when the conductor died. So that little element of surprise, again, is what I'm looking to do. So there's a lot of these little quirky projects, and also, but my real, I guess, inspiration or desire for projects involves writing and also making little films, particularly focusing on the Hudson River. And I do have dreams which, again, hearken into the shadow, which would be to tell ghost stories, much like the ones found in the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, that pertain to history, the Headless Horseman being the prime example.
Now that's a really, really interesting point, because I wanted to ask, you are such a passionate individual about the Hudson Valley and all the lore that is surrounding that, and ghost stories as well, and more specifically in that too. So my one question I had is, what brought about this fascination about the Hudson Valley and ghost stories in your life?
Well, it really did again begin when Sleepy Hollow Restorations had hired me, and then again provided me with, the chronicles of the Tarry Towns,
Right.
to just to retell them. And I discovered that the Hudson Valley, as Washington Irving says, abounds with ghostly tales. I had prior thought the South, Louisiana, New Orleans was really the mecca for mysterious ghostly tales. But I soon came to discover that ghosts really abound here, and that compelled me to delve more deeply into it. And I had, in probably 30 years ago, when beginning to explore this, I turned to another mentor, a man with the given name or of He Who Stands Firm. His real name was Nicholas Shumatoff, but after his exploration of the native people who lived in the Hudson Valley, some native people from the descendants of those who lived around here honored him by giving him the name. And he always pointed out it wasn't a ceremonial name, it was his name, and he actually changed his driver's license to read He, Who Stands, Firm. And he introduced me to his library, and there I was able to really delve into and discover these Hudson River lores, like the one I mentioned before about ship-sinking imps. Mm-hmm. And he also gave to me a real treasure, which was a story of a Hudson River, really a kind of a monster, a flesh-devouring monster, kind of almost a cross between the Loch Ness Monster and Sasquatch.
Wow.
That's going to be one of the key stories in the Supernatural on the Hudson book.
Fascinating.
It is a really intriguing story.
So, I mean, this fascination with mythology and ghost stories, and it really it ties so well with what we're working with too, because as folks will discover inside the Inferno, I mean, there's a ton of demons and demons who are also related to specific sins and governing those types of sins. And I always loved that there was a deeper meaning in context with everything that was included. Nothing was put there just to be put there. Everything has an underlying message. So a big part of Homerik is sort of reading between the lines and not just taking anything that's been put in there for granted. Rather, everything has a backstory. which I think just adds another layer of depth to storytelling and writing and literature. So going into the Inferno, having to unveil all that stuff and portray the characters in a manner, right? I envisioned this story to be very inspired by the likes of Oscar Wilde and War of the Worlds, and that type of audio experience of hearing the soundscapes, hearing the music, almost like a movie, but in audiobook form. I think that's something very different that will strike a new audience to appreciate I think metal in a way that they may have never thought so before. And part of that message with Homerik is to do something unique and different, but larger than the creators themselves. And I feel that that's a big part of what we're doing. I always felt so detached from my work in a sense that I've only been the messenger, not necessarily the originator. And perhaps that's a thing with artistic creatives like ourselves. We always feel like a vessel of, and that's probably why the Greeks referred to their ideas coming from the muses, and genius being coming from the overall ethereal plane. So being a genius was to be in touch with that. And in this case, I feel very much like a vessel, and I see that through you as well, and maybe that's why we get along so well. But I wanna expand a little bit on how going from the Inferno to a follow-up like Purgatory, because the original Dante's Inferno and Dante's Purgatorio and Dante's Paradiso, most people remember Dante's Inferno. And that's because, well, it's probably the most interesting one. It gave us the very visual, in literature, in poetic form, a very visual representation of hell back in the medieval ages that helped spark an entire real genre in and of itself. And where we derive a lot of our horror from, even nowadays, stems all the way back to this medieval poet. I find it so incredible. And when we were in this discussion of, okay, well, the Inferno's being worked on right now, we've got I would say maybe 80% of it done at this point. The last bit is all post-production, but all of the content is there, and we know where it's going, but our challenge was very deeply as to how do we make Purgatory now an interesting story. Because, well, I wouldn't necessarily refer to metal being involved with Purgatory, because Purgatory is very much of a limbo-like plane within the afterlife. When people say, oh, they die and they don't necessarily go to heaven, they don't necessarily go to hell, they go to Purgatory and they spend some time there. But does anybody really know what happens in Purgatory? So that was a big challenge, and I wanted to just open the discussion as to our process and what were you thinking as, over the course of time as we've been unveiling Purgatory to ourselves, that writing process. How can you explain to me your side of it, and what is the path of creating something, perhaps out of something that really had little to no, maybe entertainment value in that factor? How do you create more entertainment? How do you create something more engaging and memorable? And I would argue that what we're creating with Purgatory is even far more interesting than what we've created with Inferno. So I'd like to hear from you about that process that we've had.
Yeah, it's been a really fruitful process, and frankly, sometimes I thought I just I don't want to interfere with what you've already done. I'd rather just serve as the narrator. But then when we began to delve into it, and you let me do some little editings to give maybe more background to some of the demons or the figures that were encountered in the Inferno, I got really drawn into the what happens in Purgatory, and to an extent even in the Inferno, which is the evolution of the soul. We've been told that the soul is eternal. So in the Inferno, it's really about just trying to endure the punishment, because there's kind of among the souls there some degree of a lack of an awareness. They're not able to really evolve. They're maybe just trying to escape being tortured by demons. And the spectacular world you created, building upon Dante's, of these, demons and these souls and, rivers of flowing lava and all, is just fantastic. I mean, it's, tailor-made for, an audience who prefers to be riveted by heavy metal and loves to be, drawn into to be totally immersed in an intense video game. And I saw and felt all of that in the Inferno, but also enjoyed figuring out seeing how Dante and Virgil would escape these various demons and get through the levels of the Inferno. But Purgatory, of course, implies that you're going to be purged of those things that are holding you back.
Right.
Sloth, envy, pride, lust. But it also shows that you have to be like perhaps one of the characters that you've introduced to Purgatory from Norse mythology, Loki, who is the trickster. And you need to be in Purgatory. You need to find out what tricks, what things are there for you to learn. And sometimes to be broken out of your pattern of being, overwhelmed by sloth, envy, lust, greed, you need to have a trickster come along to prod you, or even kill what's there of you to have you move and ascend through Purgatory. And you have to figure out who it is that you need to meet, what magical helper, like in a fairy tale, you need. So that is what fascinated me. Plus, I've been finding that really making connections too between disparate figures has intrigued me, like finding connections between Loki and Dracula, or a connection between, say, Dracula's drinking of blood, and the gods who have who drink holy ichor, or their blood, I think, is ichor. It makes them immortal. And there's a story too of Loki stealing the apples that make the Norse gods, always youthful. And Dracula is doing that too by drinking blood. And then two of us getting together to figure out how that might help a soul like Dante with his mission. And then it creates this real intrigue. It's not like, oh, there's Dante, he's got the magic sword and he's cutting all the demons up and bolting through. No, he's got to figure out how can he get, we've also delved into the Philosopher's Stone, which in traditional medieval mythology raises lower things like lead into gold, or can even, perhaps turn a horse into a unicorn. So that's another part of what we are puzzling together for the viewer. And I love too that it's this immersive experience of sound, a connection, of sound, of images, of storytelling. And I love too how your music features this marvelous meld between heavy metal and sometimes a romantic 1940s love song. You'll have both of those juxtaposed, which really jars and stimulates the imagination.
It's so Homerik has really changed quite a lot over the couple of years that it's been around. I mean, I started in 2014 with not really understanding what I was even starting. You know, as I was in college, this music sort of came from you know, just my imagination. I started to write it down. It was part of me experimenting with audio engineering and all this kind of stuff at the same time. So, but over time, I knew that in that first iteration, I wanted to put some sort of story into it. I didn't know what it would lead to, but it ended up becoming part of what we are seeing with the Circle of Dead Children now, and of course, even more in Purgatory. So it's very reflective of what is actually also happening within those albums, which is, as you stated, this lack of awareness in the Inferno with these souls that are just eagerly trying to just escape. We sort of see that naivete with Dante, and he goes into hell. Well, he still has these sort of thoughts and weaknesses to succumbing to the sins that he has committed in life, or that he is tempted by when he's in hell. And it's sort of Virgil who has to go like, snap out of it. We have to move beyond here. And, you know, he's very dependent on Virgil, as you will see. But when we get to Purgatory is a much different escapade. He has to really dig deep within himself, where he has to accept the person that he was, and to grow from that to become the person that he was destined to be. And that's a very, very tricky thing to do when writing. But I want to shine a light on the method of where Homerik has taken emphasis on, because in the beginning, it was very much just the music. And that's where it started. It had to start somewhere, right? So it became then involved over time with artwork. I had commissioned a man by the name of Antonin Rozovsky, who was in Ukraine, to do the artwork for the first album. And then when we got to the Circle of Dead Children, it was very, very much collaborative with our current artist, David Milgate. And that art heavily inspired the music. So really, before I even had a chance to work with you, I was working with David for about a year, I believe, already. So I was knee-deep in with David on executing these pieces and having the music curtail to that sort of vibe as I was looking at this wonderful art. So now, with the involvement of your narration, it's sort of developed even further, and now it's like we're starting with the story first. And I'm wondering, what do you think, how that emphasis, how that focus you think is going to change the process, the music, and what comes after in Homerik? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I know that, you know, with any collaboration, if you really get into it deeply, that surprises, changes will occur, and there'll be also synchronicities too. I feel that what will happen is that there'll be, of course, a stronger link between the storyline and the music, that they'll more than complement one another. They'll be kind of like the way music is, with a melody that could be the storyline, and then the music provides a harmony. The music will also serve to foreshadow, serve to give, you know, to provide another level of understanding, just as the illustrations do, and will compel people to, you know, to delve into them more. You know, I also know the music, especially within the realm of Purgatory, will provide the not just atmosphere, but the catalyst for the people viewing to understand and see how Dante will determine how to have himself raise and rise through purgatory, because there's an even greater goal of getting into the realm of the paradise and making. I won't give away what your kind of concept is, but it's a really radical revision of the classic heavens.
Yes.
It's just, overthrowing the creator in a way, but maybe with good reason. And that's what is going to be seen. And Dante, of course, is this instrumental figure.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And I'm just looking forward to encouraging you to continue with the way the music was really in one of the early videos you did, where you're kind of lulled into thinking this is something about, Nazi Germany and love, and then suddenly we're plunged into the depths of hell, and the music reflects that, great radical change.
Yeah, totally. And I'm very curious because whenever I've seen you perform, you've had a musician to go along with you, and I feel like you're very in tune with cues and things of that nature. So with the creation of Purgatory, I feel very much that it's almost like an open play where as you're walking, quote unquote, walking through in the steps of Dante, you're sort of seeing it through his eyes and hearing it as perhaps how he would have heard it, whereas the music is like an orchestration inside his head that that represents his emotions of climbing this mountain arduously and having to go through very much a big giant reflection of who he is and how he must change, and the music's supposed to emphasize a lot of that. I think music is very good at becoming a like you said, a catalyst for the listener to, I think, relate to the individual that's going through. So, I find that to be enormously entertaining. I think that, with the inclusion of gods like Loki and figures like Dracula, and how Purgatory is going to incorporate such figures is, I think, wild.
It is. I mean, you haven't even mentioned that. I mean, you keep surprising me with the different characters you're bringing together. We've talked a lot about Medusa too in this.
Yes,
and
that's true.
And how, she was kind of a wronged figure, but also is part of the quest that Dante's on, and he has to, much like Perseus, figure out how to, get around and maybe create an alliance with the likes of Medusa, Dracula, and Loki. I mean, this is really heady stuff that.
Yeah.
But the beautiful thing is, and this is what inspires me too, is there is a connection, and the music too can provide that. That connecting too. There even could be, of course, and as often there are, messages within the music that will guide the listener too.
I find that to be amazing. And, on that note, Jonathan, this interview has been quite enthralling for me. Thank you for spending your time talking to me and to also present this material to our fans. I find that Homerik is very long-term, the type of project that it has to always be fueled by this passion, and having people like you on board this team has taken this project to new heights. So I want to say, with the deepest gratitude, thank you for being a part of this, and I hope that this project will continue to inspire you in your other ventures, and that it will help all of us sort of elevate ourselves as people. Morally, I think it will serve as a good guide for people who are looking for, I think, some sort of way forward, to point them to their north. And that was one of the lines that my father always said, is just to always keep following your north. And I relate to that so much, as, ever as a kid, be finding a passion that I wasn't clear on at one point, but when I came about to my high school and early college years, trying different things, I found out that while I wasn't, even though I do have the adept skills as a technician, I'm not a technician at heart. I'm really an artist, and I had to come abound to realize that. So part of this is a reflection of who I am as an artist, developing and blossoming, and I find that incorporating my talents with folks who have other talents, like yourselves and David, for his artwork, I feel it's a great meeting of the minds that this project needs. And Homerik has always been a collaborative thing, whether it was an ex-bandmate or it's a future collaborator. It's always been about more than me, and so I just want to thank you for being a part of that.
Well, I'm really grateful to be, to help bring out the best in you. It's doing it for me as well. And this is a real exciting, intriguing, creative project. And, to really delve into what is the afterlife, what is the evolution of our soul through this project is just, fascinating for me. So thanks for having me here with you.
Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Oh.
Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us on this interview with Jonathan Kruk. It's a pleasure, and we will see you next time. Thank you.